Hello aspirants, looking at current affairs for 15th November. The news items which we have picked up from the Hindu are these 8. We'll discuss them in detail. The first one, Azhar sanctions, Uri out of India's proposal to UN. So we have already discussed this quite often, it has been in news. Maulana Masood Azhar, who is the founder of JEM, Jaish-e-Mohammed, which was a terrorist organization targeting India, founded in the year 2000. So he is been on the terror list of India, and now we want him to be on the international terror list. That is, the Sanctions Committee of United Nations should declare him as a terrorist. So that would impose sanctions against him too. He is presently residing in Pakistan. So the Sanctions Committee, which is United Nations 1267 Sanctions Committee, it has all P5 members of the Security Council, means all members with veto powers in the Security Council on this committee too. So out of them, China is the one which is putting a hold on India's proposal to declare Maulana Masood Azhar as a terrorist. So presently we have provided revised proposals to United Nations in which we have dropped down Uri terror attacks case. So Uri attacks which took place in September 18, immediately the government had declared that Jaish-e-Mohammed is the organization against this, involved in this terror attack. So this has been questioned because National Investigation Agency, NIA, which looks into terror related cases, has not yet completed its investigation. So how can such a quick conclusion be made? So government says there are clear indications, whatever have been found in the diary, everything mentions, and there's clear idea that Jaish-e-Mohammed is involved and Maulana Masood Azhar, being its founder, is the one involved. So now the government has decided to drop down Uri in that proposal because the investigations have not been completed yet. So that is one aspect. Another aspect is about China's technical hold. So China's technical hold was done for the first time in April 2016. And then this goes on for 6 months. So in October 2016, when it would have ended, China put in another technical hold on it. So this is again on a technical hold now. So we'll have to wait and watch what would be China's strategy. Of course, this shows how China supports Pakistan. So it is not allowing this to take place. Once this Maulana Masood Azhar is put on the 1267 Sanctions Committee terror list, then there will be actions taken against him by all United Nations member countries. It is bound that they should take action. So that would mean that there will be freezing of assets and funds of him. Then there would be restrictions and ban on his entry and transit in any member country. So that would put pressure on Pakistan. So it would prohibit supplying, selling and transferring of arms and their use by him. So these are the sanctions which would be imposed. There are 9 other people too whose names we have provided to be included in the 1267 Sanctions Committee. So all these terrorists have been named here. Also, you should know that Maulana Masood Azhar is said to be, he and his JEM is said to be involved in 2001 parliament attacks, as recent as even the Pathankot airbase attacks in Jan 2016, and also the Uri attacks as we see presently, though that has not been mentioned right now. But then he was also arrested. He was involved in Mujahideen activities in Afghanistan. He started visiting India, and in Jammu and Kashmir he became active. He was arrested in Jammu and Kashmir, but after that his release was sought during the Kandahar hijack. So during that time, to release the hostages, terrorists were handed over. So he was one amongst them. So that happened in 1999, and in 2000 he has found Jaish-e-Mohammed, which has conducted various terrorist attacks in India, starting with even the most prominent being 2001 parliament attack. So these are the cases against him in India. Then the next news item is NSG still a far cry for India as China insists on NPT linkage. So this is again news about China's obstruction for India at an international forum. So this is regarding NSG, Nuclear Suppliers Group, which is a 48-member international grouping, and China is one of the members here. And any new member to NSG can be added only by consensus, means if all 48 members agree to the accession. And China is not the only country which is opposing India's membership. Other countries are also raising their voices, though they are subdued. So we have discussed this earlier about BRICS countries too, and two of them, which is Brazil and South Africa. They have signed NPT to become member of NSG, so they don't want to support India without signing NPT that it should become a member. And another, of course, New Zealand also. While on a visit to India, the New Zealand head also said that we will play a constructive role, though it did not give full support to membership. So there are oppositions. China is the major opposition to India's membership to NSG, and it insists on NPT linkage, that without signing nuclear non-proliferation treaty, if a country wants to become a member of NSG, then there should be a predefined criteria. So it says this should be a two-step process. First, decide the criteria that how non-NPT members can become members of NSG, and then each member related accessions can be discussed. So that why is it insisting on this? Because it wants Pakistan also to become a member of NSG if India becomes a member. So because both India and Pakistan are non-signatories to NPT, Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. So why are they non-signatories? India's stand is that NPT is a discriminatory treaty because it declares the P5 members, 5 permanent members of United Nations Security Council, as nuclear weapon states. So they are nuclear weapon states, they can acquire nuclear weapon related technology, but all others are non-nuclear weapon states, so they should not conduct any nuclear weapon related trade. So this aspect is protested against because India has acquired nuclear weapon capability. So why is it not recognized as a nuclear weapon state is a question. So the international forums do not want to recognize that, though we have been given a de facto status. So India, Pakistan, Israel are countries which are nuclear weapon states but not recognized as such for this NPT too. So they do not sign NPT. So this aspect is that non-proliferation basically means that you should not proliferate, should not spread. Means once you have nuclear technology, then you should not spread it to other countries so that they can also develop nuclear weapons. So if NPT is signed by us, that would impose restrictions on us on nuclear weapon capability too, because according to it, we are not nuclear weapon states. So there is no question of signing NPT. But then without signing NPT, we want to become a member of NSG, and India's stand is that this has happened earlier because France is a founding member of NSG. NSG was also founded in 1975. So that was the first meeting which took place of NSG, and its reason for its founding was also because India conducted its nuclear test, the second nuclear test, Pokhran 2, in 1974. So as a reaction to this, NSG was formed. So that is also a fact, because it was felt that without putting the restrictions which are already there on nuclear trade, that are not sufficient, and there need to be more restrictions, because nuclear technology which is provided for peaceful purposes can be used to develop nuclear weapons too. An example being given that how India has done it. So this aspect, to put a check on this aspect, NSG was formed to put further restrictions on nuclear trade in critical technologies which can be used for nuclear weapon development. So that is the idea. So now India is saying that France became a member of NSG at the time of its inception, and at that time it was not a signatory to NPT. France acceded to NPT in 1992. So accession means there are 3 terms with respect to treaties. One is signing a treaty, second is ratifying a treaty, and third is acceding to a treaty, ACCEDE. So signing a treaty means just that you accept whatever is mentioned in the treaty as correct, and you sign and give your approval for the treaty. The treaty does not become binding on you if you only sign it. You means I mean a country. So when the country ratifies the treaty after signing it, then it is the time that that treaty becomes binding on the country. And the third aspect, accession is again same as ratification, but that happens after the treaty has been put into effect and countries have started following the treaty. So people who join in late, countries who join in late are said to accede to treaty. So that was the case with France. France acceded to NPT later in 1992, not in 1975. So that shows that NSG membership was there in 1975 with France till 1992 without being a signatory or accession to, without acceding to NPT. So that's why how India shows that NPT and NSG are not linked. So that is our stand. But let's see what happens. It is presently the Vienna meeting has taken place of NSG. So in this meeting, they discussed the two-step intergovernmental process to address the issue of non-NPT states participation, as China is insisting on the two-stage process. So we'll have to wait and watch what happens on this too. So this is regarding again why NSG is important for us, because once we are member of NSG, then critical nuclear technology trade can also be opened up for us. So of course NSG is important for us. So we satisfy all other criteria which are there for NSG, though not on paper, but NPT's membership signatory being one aspect which we lack on. So we'll have to wait and watch. US completely supports us on this aspect. So we have to wait. There will be positive developments. Only concern is that China insisting on this will result in India becoming member of NSG, and then it will push for Pakistan to become a member of NSG too. So that is the only case. So this will see further developments later. Then the next news item is Kohinoor represents sentiments of people. The center is making all efforts to bring back the Kohinoor diamond, which presently is studied in the British Crown. So the affidavit which the center has put before the Supreme Court says that the Kohinoor diamond was duplicitously confiscated. That is the term. Confiscated by the East India Company from a minor Indian Maharaja. So this was after the Second Anglo-Sikh War in 1849, when the British East India Company won. This Kohinoor diamond was taken by them from the boy king, that was Maharaja Duleep Singh of Punjab. So Punjab became part of British East India Territory. So now the affidavit which has been filed also says about acts which are there in place. So it says that Antiquities and Art Treasures Act of 1972 is there in India, but then this will not help us in bringing back because it's an Indian act, bringing back the diamond from Britain. So that requires bilateral association as well. Also there is a UNESCO convention too, that is UNESCO Convention on Means of Prohibiting and Preventing Illicit Import, Export and Transfer of Ownership of Cultural Property. So even here both India and UK are signatories. So what is required actually is a special agreement between the two countries, which can result in handing over of Kohinoor diamond from UK to India. So government is making all out efforts. So this a little history about this Kohinoor diamond too. You can see this is the Kohinoor diamond which is studied in the British Crown. First of all, Kohinoor is not the only diamond which has left the shores of India, but there are other 9 significant other diamonds too which are presently there in museums in Washington, Moscow, Paris, Istanbul. Also some of them are part of Iranian crown jewels too. So they have left Indian shores. The Kohinoor diamond's history dates a little further. But then these 9 other diamonds had been mined during the times of Qutub Shahi rulers in Deccan. And the Kohinoor diamond dates much earlier. So that was during the time of Kakatiyas of Warangal that this diamond was mined, where Rani Rudrama Devi was the ruler. And during this time then the Warangal region was attacked many a times by Delhi Sultanate rulers, and probably during the time of Alauddin Khilji's raid in the Deccan and in Warangal, this Kohinoor diamond fell in their hands and it became part of Delhi Sultanate. After Delhi Sultanate, it went into the hands of Mughals from Babur, Humayun. Shah Jahan had it in his peacock throne as well. So Kohinoor diamond was with the Mughals. During the time of Nadir Shah's invasion in Delhi, this fell into his hand. And from Nadir Shah's hand, it went into the hands of his generals who were there in Punjab as well, stationed. And after that, it went into the hands of Maharaja Ranjit Singh of Punjab. So he got hold of the diamond in his wars once he got hold of the treasuries there. And finally, it came to the Britishers after the Second Anglo-Sikh War. So this is the entire history of Kohinoor diamond. Then next we look at Israel President arrives in Mumbai on 6-day visit. So Israel President Mr. Rivlin is on a visit to India for 6 days. Even Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is expected to visit Israel in 2017. So this is after a long time that high-level visits of heads of government is taking place between India and Israel again. India-Israel cooperation is strong, especially in the agriculture sector, because Israel has this dryland farming technology. So drip irrigation is also said to have been established and developed by Israel. So these Israeli companies, one company's head who is also visiting along with Israeli president is Watergen. So this is a futuristic company which specializes in optimal use of water resources. So this is of very much significance to India, as we see water is an important resource which needs to be conserved and optimally used. So irrigation facilities being developed on these lines in India is of significance, and Israel have also set up a center of excellence. So this is Center of Excellence of Indo-Israel Agricultural Project in Karnal in Haryana. So this is there. Also 2016 signifies 25 years of diplomatic relations between India and Israel. This was started in the year 1992 after the end of Cold War, that India-Israel diplomatic relations were established. So we'll hear more about this too, because this is his visit. So what takes place during this 6 days, so it will come in news, we'll discuss. The next news is world likely to cross 1.2 degrees Celsius global warming level this year. So this is the World Meteorological Organization, global UN agency on weather conditions. In its report, it has said that 2016 is expected to be the hottest year so far, crossing even the 2015 levels. So presently the global warming temperatures are calculated, means this is the global average temperature calculated as compared to pre-industrial levels. So industrial revolution started in around 1760. Post that, carbon dioxide emissions have increased drastically, resulting in global warming. So what were the temperatures in pre-industrial times? So those levels are taken as a starting point, and the rise in global temperatures was that is checked. So presently the news is that world is likely to cross 1.2 degrees Celsius global warming above pre-industrial levels in 2016. Remember, under the Paris Agreement, which was finalized in December 2015 and even in November 2016, now it has come into force. So this Paris Agreement sets the target of 2 degrees Celsius as the absolute threshold for staying within safe global warming levels. So this is till 2100, end of this century. So it has also an ambitious target of ensuring that it stays below 1.5 degrees Celsius levels. So that is ambitious. It knows that it will not be achievable. So presently the news is that 1.2 degrees Celsius level mark will be crossed soon. So that is there. The extreme weather conditions too, which are result of global warming, are discussed. So there are 3 specific cases. One is cyclones. Tropical cyclones have increased drastically, floodings have increased drastically, and heat waves and droughts. So these are the consequences of global warming. So when global warming takes place, average temperatures rise. So then the ice caps in the Arctic, Antarctic ice caps melt. Even Himalayan, we are seeing that ice caps are melting, glaciers are melting. So what happens because of this drastic melting, because of high temperatures, that the seawater level rises. So when seawater level rises, it results in conditions in the water, sea water also, such that it results in various cyclones. So that is one aspect. Then also flooding takes place because of that. Even in some regions, this is the reverse too, because of high temperatures, heat waves aggravate, even drought conditions aggravate. So these are there which are discussed. Even this World Meteorological Organization report has highlighted 3 specific cases of cyclones too. So cyclones are known by different names in different places. It's known as hurricane. So Hurricane Matthew, which was seen in Haiti and parts of USA. Then typhoon Lion Rock in Korea. So in Asia it is called typhoon. And cyclone Winston in Fiji. So these are also highlighted, very devastating cyclones which took place in this year. Then flooding is spoken about in the report regarding Yangtze Basin in China. In Sri Lanka, floodings have escalated. Even in Mali, it saw the highest breaching of the river Niger. So floodings have increased significantly here too, in Sahel in Mali. Then heat waves and droughts are highlighted. Heat waves in southern Africa, and the drought has become more severe. Even India, Falodi in Rajasthan in India has set a new record for heat in India. 51 degrees Celsius has been recorded in on May 19 in 2016. So this is also mentioned in the report. Even the El Nino weather events have resulted in droughts in many places around the world. So that is the report. The next news item is India's carbon emissions increased by over 5 degrees in 2015. So you should know that the highest carbon emissions are by China. But China's carbon emissions have drastically reduced because it has reduced usage of carbon as fuel. So carbon dioxide emissions of China are slowing down since the last 3 years, and this will take place further too because of reduced coal usage. So carbon dioxide emissions of 29% is by China. US is the second biggest emitter at 15%. Then that has also reduced drastically its coal usage, so that will also bring down carbon emissions worldwide. Even EU, the third largest emitter, complete together with all its 28 member states, EU causes 10% carbon dioxide emissions throughout the world, and these emissions have increased a little, so it's went up by 1.4% in 2015. So that is there. But India's carbon emissions have increased by 5.2 degrees Celsius. So this is a huge increase. So India needs better technology, cleaner fuels to ensure that carbon emissions are controlled. But then this is also a sign of robust growth. When economic growth takes place, carbon emissions would also take place. So that is also there. But then other aspect is that carbon dioxide emissions which have already taken place, they are still persisting, means though others have reduced carbon emissions, but global warming has not been coming down because carbon dioxide emitted stays in the environment for long. So carbon sinks are weak because carbon dioxide emitted has to be absorbed back from the atmosphere. That is the work of plants, trees. So these carbon sinks are weak, majorly it's plants and trees. So this is also seen because of the hot and dry conditions which we saw because of El Nino event has resulted in carbon sinks being weak too. So carbon dioxide emissions persist and global warming persists even though emissions have reduced. The next news item is economists see short-term pain, long-term gain. So this is regarding the demonetization drive of the government, and on a short term there will be some difficulties, but then on a long term it will have many benefits. So the benefits of this demonetization program which have been highlighted here are: one, it will result in a huge amount of money in the informal economy entering the formal economy, that is through the banks. So that will result in even economic growth going high because this unaccounted money will also be now accounted for. So it is expected that GDP growth rate may also go in double digits. Along with even another aspect is the goods and services tax, which will be brought into effect in 2017, hopefully. So this is one positive aspect. Another aspect is that the bank's non-performing assets will go down because banks are getting in so much cash into the accounts through the people now that it will result in it being able to give out more loans. So the non-performing assets ratio would also come down. This will also give a spur to the economy. Banks will then have the capability to provide more loans to the people, to the economy. So that is another positive aspect. Then third point which is highlighted is the transition to cashless economy. So cashless means online transactions taking place, mobile wallets, cashless wallets which are used. So that will also get a spur. So that is another positive development. Then also it is said that rupee will appreciate because on a short term basis the monetary constraint will also be there because of less money supply in the economy. So this may even result in appreciation of the rupee. So that is also expected. Inflation levels to be controlled is another aspect which will result, because even since the money supply is low in the economy, this will bring down inflationary levels to people would not charge or increase prices so high that people cannot afford to pay. So this is also another positive aspect because of the demonetization. So banking system will get a boost. One aspect which is there is the cash rich sectors, which are cash driven sectors like real estate, gold, jewelry business, that may get hit. But overall, it is a positive development which is expected. Then the next news item is task force led by Mundra formed to recalibrate ATMs. So it has been realized now that the ATMs are not able to be used for giving out new currency. So the new currency notes, new Mahatma Gandhi notes, which as they are called, these 2000 rupee and 500 rupee notes which have been released right now in the economy, they cannot be fitted into the ATMs presently. So because these notes are of a different dimension, so that requires recalibration of ATMs. So the ATM should be able to dispense these notes. For that, every ATM in the country has to be recalibrated. So this is a huge exercise which the government has undertaken now. Earlier too, you must have read Finance Minister said that it would take at least 15 days for all the ATMs to be recalibrated. So presently a committee has been set up headed by Deputy Governor of RBI, S.S. Mundra. So this is a special task force which will look into recalibration of ATMs and ensure that this takes place in a smooth manner. So this is the idea. There another point highlighted is about white label ATMs. So what are these white label ATMs? We'll discuss. So this, what they say is a representative from each of the ATM original equipment manufacturer, OEM. So every ATM manufacturer, managed service providers who are managing the ATMs, cash in transit companies, so companies which are maintaining the cash in transit, and white label ATM operators, all will be invited to the task force for this recalibration to deliberate on the matter. So this, on the basis of this, your white label ATM which comes up, we'll see what is it. So as it highlights to, new notes are of smaller size, that's why recalibration is required. So this white label ATM, what is this? White label means no label, basically blank. It's not having a label. So there are ATMs which we generally see belong to some bank. So that we generally see. But there are also ATMs, especially in far off regions, where they do not belong to a particular bank as such. So these are called white label ATMs. So they are not run by a particular bank, but they are run by non-banking finance companies generally. So these are non-bank ATMs owned and operated by non-banks. So NBFCs are allowed to run ATMs too. So such ATMs are called white label ATMs. So banking, any bank's card can be accepted in any ATM, you know that. So this white label ATMs also allow any banks to have the transaction taking place, so that the banks do not have to invest and establish their own ATM units here. So the white label ATM is set up and other banks can avail its services. So of course the transaction fee will be charged by the white label ATM operator. So that's how they profit. So this is an idea which has been put forth to further enhance financial inclusion. So this is in place in India. Even government has given 100% FDI on white label ATMs in India too. So it is encouraging the practice to allow more ATMs to be established in India and bringing more of people into this mainstream economy, that is called financial inclusion. So bringing into the banking system. So that is it. So these are the news items for today. Thank you.